Hello and welcome to episode 81 of PubShorts. We cannot believe that we are at 81, and this episode is called One Vision, inspired by the famous song by Queen. My name is Dr. KK. I'm the Innovation Officer at Trincan Inago, and I have with me beaming Tony on a Monday morning.
It was a Monday. It's always a Monday morning somewhere in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, KK. Hello, listeners and what viewers of the podcast. I'm Tony O'Rourke. And welcome to PubShorts, which is a regularly recorded, I'd say at least once a week, if not twice a week, podcast where KK and I discuss different topics relating to the world of research, communication, technology, policy, publishing, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and also
And today, sorry.
tidbits about music. Okay, go on.
Oh yeah, that's right. So that's right. I mean, so every episode has a link to a song. KK are both. So I suppose the polite way of describing it is gently music obsessed. We always try to give a theme to an episode that's related to a British song, a UK song, and the stories tend to link to that topic, or the topic links to those stories.
Right, and so quickly, Tony, why are we calling this One Vision?
Well, that's a very good question, KK. I'm glad you asked, because whoever comes up with these ideas is clearly a genius. It comes up, the whole topic today, One Vision, which is based on the classic Queen song, One Vision from 1985, spotlights the errors that researchers, lawmakers, and funders not the errors, the efforts, I should say, not the errors, that these researchers, lawmakers, and funders are coming together to try and defend against US science policy, changing US policy, grant freezes, travel bans, discriminatory funding cuts. Freddie Mercury called for a shared purpose, which he did, I suppose. Well, did he write the song? I think Brian May wrote the song, to be fair. And so we're looking at some of the courtroom victories that have taken place recently to try and do things like reinstate NIH grants, push back on AI regulation, and other interventions aimed at preserving vital public health databases. So yes, it's a common vision for the greater good.
Excellent, Tony. That is a perfect segue into the first article itself. So I'm going to shift to sharing screen. So this is an article published in State Scoop titled "State Lawmakers Push Back on Federal Proposal to Limit AI Regulation." So as the title indicates, over 260 legislators signed a letter against the 10-year ban on state AI regulation in a federal budget bill. They believe the ban would hinder states' ability to protect against AI-related issues like deepfakes and job loss. Very concerning. And supporters of the ban argue that it prevents a fragmented regulatory landscape which would affect US tech firms. Also very fairly obvious. And the letter for supporting the supporters emphasizes the need for states to maintain the ability to address quickly evolving AI threats. So the dispute between maybe the regulators as well as the law and the opponents of this is basically highlights the tension between federal and state roles. And this bill is expected, because of the opposition as well as the legal opposition, it is expected to be reviewed by the Senate soon. And among states, some states, attorney generals and National Association of State Chief Information Officers have also opposed the ban. California, Colorado, and Utah have already enacted laws targeting AI use, showcasing the importance of state-level action. So this is sort of a mixture of what's happening in the in US in relation to AI regulation as well. And we know that Trump and Elon Musk are officially feuding right now. Some of these are, so some of the points that they are disagreeing on is also related to such things.
Yeah, and I don't really understand. On the one hand, I empathize with the need to sort of protect national economies, but AI is a global phenomenon. If there are any curbs in sort of or regulations that are put in place that restricts the way AI is being managed, it doesn't stop what's going on in the rest of the world. It doesn't stop what's going on in China. The developments happening in Europe. That's going to continue.
Right.
So I think the regulators have done a good thing to try and curb these restrictions.
Right. We need checkpoints, I guess, or guardrails in terms of AI development, and
Yeah,
this is
well,
what.
yeah, I think we'll talk about those more later on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And moving on to the next story, it is titled Another Blow: How Trump's Latest Travel Ban Could Harm Research. This is published in Nature. So, this article discusses Trump's new travel ban affecting 19 countries. This ban could disrupt infectious disease research, and it affects international collaborations in science. And the policy that the Trump administration has put forward adds to the existing immigration restrictions. It raises the concerns about the future of U.S. research universities, and some universities may consider relocating due to these policies. I think a few episodes before, previously we discussed how conferences may be rescheduled out of the U.S. as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, scientists have expressed concern regarding barriers to research, and the White House claims that the ban is simply to prevent terror threats. So, where do you stand on this? What do you think? As in, is it going to be increasing? As is US going to stop becoming the center of conferences, research, and all of that because of what the Trump administration has done?
I think I, I, it, I want to be careful what I say here,
Mm-hmm.
really. On the one hand, again, I understand the need to want to protect one's own national interests,
Right.
but this you know, managing things like global disease, infectious disease, is a global phenomenon. I don't understand some of the policies that are coming out in terms of restricting funding around those areas. And when a university starts talking about wanting to relocate its research activities, that's fairly substantial. That's not the sort of thing that's going to happen overnight. So if policies change in 4, 5, 10 years' time, those institutions that have already relocated somewhere else aren't going to come back. So I think, there is grounds for concern. I suppose on the other hand, you look at a number of U-turns that have happened in recent months.
Yep.
I wonder how sustainable this is as well. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's the whole there's a balance that's being disrupted here, and I'm not quite sure in whose favour.
Right. And in a related story, so this one is titled "We Were Ready for This." Meet scientists suing the Trump administration to reinstate terminated grants. So we've talked about legal measures from. I guess we talked about the state legal courts themselves opposing some of it. Then publishers have made a move. Now researchers have done this.
Yeah.
Scientists are suing the Trump administration over terminated NIH grants. These grants were cut without detailed reasoning, and lawsuits argue that the terminations are arbitrary and violate the constitution. And we are also concerned, as per this article, in terms of the impact on LGBTQ plus health research, which I think we have already talked about. My friend is directly affected in terms of LGBTQ plus health research, and researchers are struggling to keep their projects afloat in the middle of all these funding cuts. And the case will be heard in court to determine the legality of the termination. And judging by whatever happens at the state level, when it eventually goes to the Supreme Court, we still have a problem, because the Supreme Court is, I guess, in favor of some of these Trump-related measures. Anyway, so what are your thoughts on this from an international research perspective?
Again, what happens is that this research just moves elsewhere, and increasingly the US becomes less the center for research. The US is a fantastic research economy.
Mm-hmm.
These things just undermine their reputation. And I will, from our perspective as well, if you're in a research organization, or you're a researcher and you're uncertain about how you should best communicate your research, we have got resources available, like our consultancy service, that can help guide and advise researchers in terms of the best ways to establish and communicate their research.
Right. And in a related story, this is the court's decision. So a judge in a U.S. court has ruled against Trump administration's NIH grant cuts, labeling them discriminatory. So it's titled Judge Rules Against NIH Grant Cuts and calls them discriminatory. The decision mandates the restoration of funding to numerous research projects, and the ruling criticizes the lack of reasoning, which is what we just discussed. And the whole thing about the judge has ruled in favor of the people who are suing, and the court's decision highlights issues of discrimination against minority and LGBTQ plus communities as well. So that's another angle. So related story, you've already said what needs to be said.
Yeah. Well, the final thing I was going to say is that it's great to see this judge taking a particular position, but ultimately, if this goes to appeal and ultimately goes up to the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court is very much in favour of some of these policies, the individual judges, because of how they're being selected, I wonder how effective this particular judge's ruling is going to be.
Right. Right. We have to keep as in we've looking for further developments on this front, I guess.
Indeed, we
Yeah.
have to stay positive.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Related news story. It is titled "Will Gates and Other Funders Save Massive Public Health Databases at Risk from Trump Cuts?" As in, this is a question
Yeah,
asked as the title. So we have talked
yeah,
about databases requiring federal funding, and when those databases go offline, the researchers all around the world are affected. So this is in relation to that. The Demographic and Health Service (DHS) program faces extinction after US funding was cut. Data from the DHS is highly cited and used by researchers in over 90 countries. So the
yeah.
UN and other organizations are working to find alternative funding sources, and organizations like the World Bank and the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are involved in talks to save the database. So this is excellent news in my opinion, and we've already seen the wonderful work done by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in the context of research, especially in developing economies. Your thoughts on this, Tony?
Um, Again,
Mm-hmm.
it's anything that sort of restricts access to the progress of science, I think, is a negative. And removing access to databases that
Mm-hmm.
clearly set the sort of establish the groundwork for so much scientific research is in my opinion a negative
Right.
move. So if organisations like Bill, the Gates Foundation can actually step in, or World Bank can step in to save these databases, I think they should be applauded. I mean, it's early days yet; they're just talking about it at the moment. So there's no certainty that they will, but let's hope that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're absolutely right; they've been doing some fantastic work, particularly around um, open access policies around funding
Yep.
research communication in areas like infectious disease.
Excellent. So, moving on to the next article, this is sort of an overlap between research integrity and US related news. So, this one is from Retraction Watch, title "Apparent NCI Director Candidate Wants Open, Respectful Post Publication Peer Review While Promoting Anonymous Site That Calls Sleuths a Mob." So, we are talking about Warwick S.L. Deary, a physician scientist from Brown University. He criticizes the post publication forum PubPeer, which is, in my opinion, it's on one of the better places in the context of academic constructive peer review kind of a criticism or critique for a published paper, and he calls that platform tyrannical. Science Guardians, an anonymous site, critiques PubPeer and calls commenters a mob. And L. Deary amplifies Science Guardians' post but claims not to be involved in their operations. LDRE supports open and respectful post-publication peer review, and questions have been put up about transparency and his opinion on scientific publishing in the context of these kind of publishing and promotion of Science Guardian. So, what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on this, Tony?
I only to say, I think that the space for peer review and is big enough to have different models in place. And clearly, there may be certain subject areas where a more open, collaborative peer review may not necessarily be effective, but when it is possible, then it should be encouraged. And I just think, yes, everyone's entitled to opinion, but I think the market has to decide how it wants to best deliver its own services.
Yeah, and PubPeer, which was started as is mentioned in the article, was started in 2012 and won the Einstein Award in 2024 for promoting quality in research. And
Yeah,
as far as I know, it is sort of as sort of good as Retraction Watch in terms of picking up research integrity issues. So I don't know why we have people commenting that this is a mob and scientific sleuths are somehow bad, because I think we need more scientific sleuths to point out research
yeah,
integrity issues. Yeah.
yeah. I agree.
Yeah, and moving on to the next article, it is from, I think, science.org. Let the article load, and its title: Science's Reform Movement Could Have Seen Trump's Call for Gold Standard Science Coming, critics say. So there's a comma there. So this article is from Science Magazine. The science reform movement aimed to improve research rigor, but may have inadvertently helped Trump administration attack science. So Trump's executive order calls for gold standard science and seen as targeting inconvenient scientific findings. The order emphasizes reproducibility and transparency, aligning with some reform goals but diverging in other aspects. And critics worry that it allows political influence over scientific integrity and could dismiss valuable evidence. And the reform movement began in psychology due to concerns over replication and publication bias. And critics argue that the crisis narrative was exaggerated and could be misused by anti science factions. And I completely agree with that. Reformers are urged to communicate issues with more humility and, and context to prevent misuse. Now, the this executive order should prompt reformers to ensure that their messages are used are not used against science. Now, we have discussed some aspects, some angles to the story in the sense that I think we have heard very eminent critiques in the publication space critique that if you are just wanting reproducibility based studies, and Trump is promoting reproducibility studies to sort of
Mm.
to ward off any bad let's say bad intended original studies. But that is not the only way to ensure rigor, scientific rigor in the published paper. I guess the world instead there's a call for strengthening peer review in terms of maybe bringing automation and taking care of the peer review crisis, etc. So lots of related points to this. So what are your overall thoughts on
I,
this?
I think we're going to see things changing very quickly over the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, improvements in peer review, improvements in greater rigor in peer review, greater reproducibility of research as well. Quickly identifying when research isn't reproducible or reproducible, identifying fake research. I think there's a lot of work. So I think I you know, I know we've been a little bit critical of some of Trump's policies, but the gold standard for research, I think, is important. There has to be standards.
Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, setting a gold standard, but on the other hand, you know, withdrawing funding for policies that aren't necessarily as so politically convenient, I think isn't necessarily the right way to go. But that's hopefully that will evolve and change. So no, I think we're going to see a lot of change in the next few years.
Yeah, and one of the people in the photograph that we are sharing is RFK Jr., and we have quick hits starting with some of his news stories related to it. So this one, U.S. Health Secretary Kennedy guts Vaccine Advisory Committee. So this is about the decision made by RFK Jr. To dismiss all 17 members of CDC's Vaccine Advisory Panel, sparking significant backlash from health experts and scientists. Now, the obvious research integrity concern lies. I mean, he would probably induct people who are biased or biased against, I suppose, vaccines, for example. So this is definitely a research integrity threat, and we have a related story. But I'll pause to ask you, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. There's very few times in my life when I'm speechless. I haven't got something to say. This is one of those times. I just do not understand this policy.
Yeah.
And we all lived through very frightening times with the COVID pandemic. We all lost people. We know people that were lost. I just cannot understand this particular position.
Yeah.
It just seems such a retrograde thing to do, and to sack, that. Yeah. 17 members of a committee that's effectively been, fighting against these sorts of diseases. I don't know what to
but
say.
Let's cover the related story. So who is on the new panel, RFK Jr.'s new vaccine panel? What will they do? So this one is about that. The critics, so the new people, as in they're obviously handpicked by RFK Jr., 8 new members onto the advisory committee on immunization practices. And so the 17 members have been obviously dismissed. Some new members have a history of skepticism toward vaccines, which raises alarm among experts. And the new committee might recommend fewer vaccines, which could affect insurance coverage and availability. So in a nutshell, I mean, these are significant changes in the context of, I guess, pharma companies and basically life sciences and medical research as well. And it is concerning from my point of view because I come from that field. And I guess
of course.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, these are difficult times for pharma companies, but this is a global market. It's going to be looking to other economies to be able to develop these drugs, and I think we'll see other economies taking the lead and succeeding where perhaps the US has led in the past.
Right. Are you ready to fly across the Pacific, Tony? Because we are talking about China. So this is from STM Publishing News. Data released in this year's Independent Nature Index research leaders table shows a shift in global research landscape. I'll read out some of the points. So China's dominance is clearly coming out. China's share, a key metric, increased by 17% in 2024. 8 Chinese institutions are in the top 10, up from 7 last year. And other Asian countries like South Korea and India are also rising in research output, which I am very happy to see.
Yeah.
Western nations are seeing a decline in their research contributions. The US and other Western countries are losing their top positions. The Chinese Academy of Sciences, which who we work with, remains a top institution in terms of research output, and Western
Yeah.
institutions like Max Planck Society and CNRS are dropping in their ranking. So I'm very happy to see, and just we have a strong market presence. We help researchers and publishers in China through Charles Worth Group, and something that I'm very proud. Maybe we have contributed to some of these increased research output trends in East Asia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the shift towards the East is only continuing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see this stopping. The actions that are happening in the US at the moment, and some of the funding pressures within Europe means that the research in the eastern part of the world is only going to grow.
Right.
In share.
Right. Do you want to talk briefly about China? The Charles Worth Group's China Expert Services?
I mean, yeah, well, yes, of course. I mean, it's maybe slightly glib, but if there's a publisher out there and they're looking to establish or understand how they can develop their products or services and their markets within China, then I would urge you to talk to my colleagues at within China Expert Services at the Charles Worth Group. They've been there for over 25 years. Working with publishers, working closely with publishers to establish and to build brands locally in China, and they probably better than anybody else, in my opinion, understand the market, the dynamics of the Chinese research market.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. And we have a couple of China-related stories to close this episode. New study shows that China is now a global powerhouse in clinical research. So this study highlights the rise of China in clinical research. More than 11,000 trials were registered by 2023. I do not know why the content is not being displayed. And surpassing the US by 50%. Larger trial numbers do not always mean better outcomes. So we have to keep that in mind. And there are obviously concerns about China's clinical trial transparency as well. Laws, unlike those in the US, do not regulate public result disclosure, leading to potential data gaps. And global registries have data inconsistencies, making cross-country comparisons difficult. And WHO's new guidance aims to improve registry data quality, but adoption timelines are unclear. So we have already seen general China forging ahead in terms of research output. Now there is a very sharp increase in the number of clinical trials registered as well. And we have research integrity concerns. This is from China, that is, as in because of several bad actors being spread across China as well, in terms of, let's say, paper mills and similar aspects. So what are your thoughts on it, and what is needed? So the publishing volumes are increasing, and do you have any thoughts on how some of the research integrity concerns can be allayed?
The research integrity concerns in China are no different from anywhere else in the world. We will develop tools that will help the author to determine whether they have all of their checks in place when they're presenting a paper. That will help the publisher to determine whether the author has actually adhered to all the rules that have been put in place around submissions and around quality, around structure, etc. Using our technical check reports. And as that Chinese market continues to grow, then so does the need to use these tools effectively, quickly, efficiently to be able to address these issues.
Right, and moving on to the last story. This is related to the first story that we covered, actually. So this is titled How China is Vying to Attract World's Top Scientific Talent, and this is published in Nature. So Chinese government is rolling out hundreds of policies to attract top scientists and graduates. Major financial incentives are being offered, such as lump sums and monthly allowances. Stark contrast with what's happening in the US. Both local and international researchers are targeted by these initiatives, and the US's stricter visa policies might be pushing scientists to consider moving to China. Now, China's push is part of a broader strategy for technological self-reliance. Despite high financial incentives, retaining talent long-term remains a challenge, especially in China, and academic autonomy and quality of life also are concerns if researchers are considering to move to China. But anyway, we have covered all the sort of various aspects playing into this. There are research related sort of anti-research. There's a movement seems to come. It is coming from the U.S. government, and on the other hand, China is leaping ahead in terms of research output, and Chinese government is welcoming researchers. So maybe we'll see an exodus. We've talked about exoduses to the Europe, so maybe also towards China. What do you think, Tony?
Well, I mean, it's natural that a country like China would want to step in and mop up those excellent research scientists that are not getting funded, or feel somehow disenfranchised in their current roles.
Yeah.
I wonder whether China is going to sort of follow the way Japan went, where Japan was tremendously successful in attracting scientists from outside of China in order to plug gaps. And I've met so many in my time and traveled over there, so many expat researchers who moved to Japan, not just because there were more funding opportunities, but because the resources, the quality of teaching, the quality of the research infrastructure
Right.
was second to none. And I think China's going to offer the same. There are some absolutely world-class institutions in China. I think any researcher would be proud to work for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that brings us to the end of episode 81. And Tony, just like how you mentioned that Japan was tremendously successful in attracting a lot of talent, I believe you and your band were tremendously successful in attracting a lot of patrons to the
What
pub.
a tenuous link.
So what happened over the weekend?
So I'm in several music bands, groups. And this particular band is my Irish music band. We play traditional Irish music, and we played at a village fete. So we were entertaining people as they were wandering around, going to dog shows, playing various village fete games, and our music was entertaining them in the background. So it was good fun, and they seemed to appreciate what we were doing.
Excellent. So, Tony, do you want to quickly plug where people can find all the previous episodes of PubShorts?
Yeah, so as I say, as KK said at the top of this episode, this is episode 81, and all of the episodes of PubShorts are available via our YouTube channel. So just go over there, stamp the like button, share the link with your colleagues, and give us and post some comments, give us ideas for future topics. If it's something that's really sort of engaging you or concerning you around the world of research communication, we'd be interested here. And we'll sort of try and build that into future episodes.
Yep. And
so go to YouTube, and you can contact either KK or me directly via LinkedIn, or you can contact me directly at tonyo@inago.com with your ideas, suggestions, or other comments.
Right. And until the next episodes, in the list of future episodes that Tony just mentioned, this is Dr. KK signing off on behalf of Tony as well as the rest of the team. We will see you in the next one. Bye, Tony.
See you in the next one.